Well, we know that Canadian parliamentarians are also going to be examining the actions of Facebook and other social media giants when it comes to protecting privacy in the democratic process. MPs have agreed to conduct a study to look at better privacy protections and how to ensure the integrity of the democratic and electoral processes in this country. Let's bring in three members of Parliament to talk about the Wiley testimony today and a couple of other issues here in this country. But from the foyer of the Commons, let's start tonight. I'm joined by Marco Mendicino, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice. Michael Cooper is the Deputy Justice Critic for the official opposition Conservatives, and Charlie Angus is the Ethics Critic for the NDP. It's good to see you all, gentlemen.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. Mr. Mendicino, let me start with you. So, more explosive testimony today from Christopher Wiley on Facebook data, the Facebook data mining story, and the alleged actions of this BC company, Aggregate IQ, and the outcome of the British Brexit referendum vote, dirty tricks in Nigerian elections, Trinidad, India. This is a Canadian company. What should we do about these allegations? What do you want to know?
Well, first of all, let me express the concerns of the government when it comes to protecting the privacy of Canadians. And this individual, who I understand is testifying before the United Kingdom Parliament, is somebody who had put forward a pilot proposal. That proposal was studied, and it was a decision of the Liberal Research Bureau.
Yeah.
Liberal Research Bureau, just to underline that, not to move forward with it. And I want to underscore that at no point did this individual have any access to any personal information or data belonging to Canadians that was in the possession of the Government of Canada or the Liberal Research Bureau. I think that's very important. And obviously, moving forward, you've heard that Minister Bryson has met with Facebook executives. He recently met with the Privacy Commissioner. The committee, as you pointed out, is going to be studying the issue. Budget 2018 sets aside over $750 million in investments to ensure that we can protect Canadians' privacy through the creation of an expertise center when it comes to cyberspace. There's also the National Center for Cybercrime. There's a lot of good there. We'd like to see the opposition parties support those measures.
Are we concerned about Aggregate IQ and these allegations and what? I mean, I guess the question I have now is, what do we know about what Aggregate IQ might have been doing in this country, Mr. Cooper? Is that a question that concerns you?
Well, that's the key question, and it's the question that the government refuses to answer. We have, Peter, an individual, Mr. Wiley, who has admitted to exploiting the private Facebook information of millions of people. We have a Prime Minister who has tried to cover up and hide the fact that Mr. Wiley is a high-ranking Liberal operative who worked for not one but two former Liberal leaders, and just 2 years ago was hired by the Prime Minister's Research Bureau, where he received a cool $100,000 from Canadians. Now, taxpayers' money, $100,000 for his services. Marco referred to a pilot project, but what I think Canadians deserve to know is, what was that pilot project? What was the terms of the contract entered into between the Liberal Research Bureau and Mr. Wiley? What was the term of the contract? I mean, there's a lot of questions, and simply saying that it's a pilot project and we decided not to go ahead with it is simply not good enough.
Mr. Angus, I guess I'm wondering if we've gone past that now. There is this connection, Mr. Wiley, to the Liberal Party, and I know opposition parties continue to have questions about that, but in the allegations you hear today from Mr. Wiley involving this Canadian company and the role they've been playing in the Brexit referendum and in other countries, would you like to hear from this company? Would you like to call them before Parliament and have them answer some questions?
Well, what we're talking about are extremely explosive allegations beyond, I think, anything that we've traditionally dealt with, because we're talking about the power of third-party operators to use the power of the Facebook platform to distort electoral results and maybe undermine elections. That is as serious as you can get. So the UK Parliament committees are fully apprised of it, dealing with it. The United States is dealing with it. I'm asking my colleagues in the Liberal Party to work with us to bring Jeff Sylvester from Aggregate IQ to committee by subpoena if necessary, so we can start to find what were the connections between Cambridge Analytica aggregate IQ. The fact that I'm not sure if he has refused to appear before the British Parliament, but I don't know if they have the jurisdiction to bring him forward. But we can do that here. So
you do in this country. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, I'm asking my colleagues in the Liberal Party, first off, if we're serious about this, let's deal with this. And then on the issue of Facebook, you know, I mean, I live on Facebook, my constituents live on Facebook, but there is a very concerning, I think, close relationship between the Liberal government and Facebook, and we just have to be aware of that, because we have to have some way of holding Facebook to account, of being able to say, this is now the biggest single data player in the world. They've been very cavalier about their obligations, and their ability to possibly the platform to be interfering with the electoral process needs much greater scrutiny.
There's also another place that needs much greater scrutiny, according to the Privacy Commissioner. Political parties in this country, they're not subject to privacy laws when it comes to the handling of the personal information they obtain through social media or other means. The Privacy Commissioner says there should be a law to cover political parties. Do you all agree that there's a gap there? If you want to protect the integrity of the democratic process, you can't do it without having laws for the political parties too. Mr. Mendicino?
Well, let me begin by echoing the concerns that Charlie had articulated, and you know, I commend the work that he's doing on the committee, and the committee is obviously independent of the House and will, you know, through the usual procedural mechanisms, decides which witnesses it wants to call and hear from. And I fully suspect that Charlie and many of our colleagues on that committee will ask appropriate questions of whoever appears before them on how to ensure that we are protecting the privacy of Canadians. But just to assure your viewers, look, the Liberal Party's relationship to Facebook is no different than the relationship between the Conservative Party of Canada and Facebook and the New Democratic Party of Canada.
Right.
And
here's
Facebook,
what I'm asking.
everybody
political
uses Facebook and social media platforms, and I think we need to have a responsible conversation about how we ensure that we're protecting the integrity of that data so that we can protect Canadians' privacy.
So you're in favor of having political parties be subjected to the same privacy laws of others?
Well, first let's have the conversation. Let's first of all, let's hear from the experts. Let's hear from the privacy.
What would the argument be for not having political parties subjected to
Well, I
the
don't think that you
laws?
can just etch this out. I think you've got to obviously proceed in a responsible way, and that means hearing from experts. It means hearing from people who provide services when it comes to analytics, and it means getting a report back from the committee and then having the House consider it. So we don't just forge ahead. We've got to make sure that we understand.
Should political parties be subjected to privacy laws that involve the integrity of the electoral process and the information of Canadians?
Look, we need to ensure that our privacy laws are as robust as possible to protect the privacy rights of Canadians, and we can have that conversation. But the first issue here is the fact that Mr. Wiley received $100,000 of taxpayers' money, an individual who has admitted to distorting data and invading the privacy rights of individuals all around the world. And Canadians, as a starting point, deserve to have some very basic questions answered, questions that the Prime Minister refuses to answer, and questions that Marco is refusing to answer here today, including what was the scope of that pilot project.
Just to be clear,
Mr. Angus, privacy. Should political parties be subject to the privacy laws?
Well, I think there's going to be two things we have to break down here. One is we are in a completely changing environment, certainly one where it's much harder to contact people, and our role as parliamentarians and political parties is to engage people in the political process, so that data is crucial. However, when we see the ability of it to be misused, the ability of, and what we're hearing on third-party operators on Facebook to have ads that don't come under any kind of scrutiny, that needs to be addressed. And the issue that concerns me is the power of Facebook. And my colleagues in the Liberal Party are very much like the cool kids of 2007. The ministers are meeting with senior people at Facebook all the time. Kevin Chan of Facebook comes out of the Liberal War Room. He's not a lobbyist, but he's meeting with ministers all the time. The concern we have is that when you have a platform as powerful as Facebook with that much data, the ability of a government to take them on and regulate if necessary is a conversation we need to have. And then out of that comes a conversation about what is the proper use of data, because we all use data analytics. What is appropriate and what isn't? Certainly what we've seen coming out of the allegations about aggregate IQ and Cambridge Analytica are very disturbing, and I'm hoping our committee will be able to provide some answers.
Let me move us along quickly here to one.
Yeah.
We also have another twist on a story involving the Prime Minister and the Aga Khan to finish on tonight. It turns out the Prime Minister received what the Ethics Commissioner had deemed an unacceptable gift from the Aga Khan during the Trudeau family vacation to that private island in the Bahamas, but a loophole in those rules prevents the public from knowing what the gift was, because unacceptable gifts don't have to be publicly disclosed. Now, the Prime Minister, you'll see, offered up the answer in the House today of what the gifts were. Let's hear about the gift exchange in this exchange in the House of Commons.
Well, Mr. Speaker, these transparency rules exist for a reason. Not only did the Prime Minister accept an illegal trip to a private island, he went there and received additional gifts from someone who is actively lobbying the government. Those are the facts. So will the Prime Minister come clean and tell Canadians, did he return those illegal and unacceptable gifts before he could be lobbied again?
Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I worked with the Ethics Commissioner throughout last year, answering all her questions, putting forward full disclosure, full transparency. She made a report which we accepted, and we followed every single recommendation she made within that report. But, Mr. Speaker, as often happens at holiday time, when you're with family, friends, you exchange gifts. And if the member opposite really wants to know, I gave him a sweater, and he gave me an overnight bag.
Marco Mendicino, so the Prime Minister says he gave the Aga Khan a sweater and the Aga Khan gave him an overnight bag. If the gift was unacceptable, I guess the next question is, what happened to it? What did the Prime Minister do with it? Did he give it back? Did he refund the value of the gift? Did he turn it over to the Crown? What did he do with it?
Well, I think Canadians have moved on from this issue, and that's because the Ethics Commissioner, with whom the Prime Minister fully cooperated through a rigorous investigation, filed a report. The Prime Minister has said on repeated occasions that he will abide by all of the recommendations which were made by the Ethics Commissioner. You can have no greater example of the relationship between the executive and a statutory officer of Parliament than the statements and the commitments which have been made by this Prime Minister. All we're getting from the opposition, though, is an obvious attempt to want to dwell on this subject rather than debate important issues like how do we rid our communities of gun violence.
And
you know, the kind of filibustering that we saw.
Hang on, is it an important?
If I could just be permitted to finish the thought.
No, but we're not to have your own show. It would be fun.
Hang on.
And you know, I would invite you on as a guest, Charlie.
Okay, well then there'd be no reason for me to be here. But look, guess what? I am here. So let me ask. So is there a difference if the bag was a $50 overnight bag or if it was a $10,000 overnight bag? Is that something Canadians should know?
The important thing is that your viewers see, and anybody who tunes into Question Period sees the same questions. You see the same kind of repetitive questions. You've seen a deliberate attempt to try and politicize every serious issue, whether it's national security, whether it's firearms legislation, whether it's on the economy or trade. The Conservative opposition can do no better than to politicize and play petty political games. Canadians see through it. What they want are serious, thoughtful debates. They don't get that from the opposition.
Mr. Cooper?
Well, look, the Prime Minister has tried to cover up every aspect of his illegal trip to the Aga Khan's private island. He tried to hide the fact that he went on the trip from Canadians until he was caught. Now he has tried to hide the fact that he took accepted gifts from the Aga Khan, gifts that the Ethics Commissioner has determined to be unacceptable. He said in the House today what the nature of those gifts are, but again, to your question, we don't know really what the value of those gifts are. And so what we see is a Prime Minister who continues to stonewall, who refuses to be accountable. And for a Prime Minister who said that sunshine is the best disinfectant, his actions couldn't be further from what he promised Canadians.
Okay,
and Canadians deserve better. They deserve answers.
Charlie Angus, you were raising this in the House today. What's your view on this?
Well, I guess the problem I have with the Prime Minister's position is that he was found guilty.
Right.
Which is unprecedented. Then this question comes up about him accepting inappropriate gifts, and he says, well, I don't have to disclose it because they were inappropriate. Well, that's not leadership. Then he throws out, well, it was an overnight bag. Well, I don't think the Aga Khan goes to Zellers to pick up gifts. So he's not acting credibly, but his partner on this trip, Seamus O'Regan, who went received a huge gift in a free trip of a billionaire, did not disclose that either. And all MPs have to disclose our travel that's third-party paid so that Canadians know. So it seems that they don't take the rules very seriously because, hey, we were just having fun, it was the Aga Khan, it was a beach. The fact is that rules exist and the Prime Minister needs to say we take them seriously. And the fact that neither he nor Mr. O'Regan came forward except under scrutiny is disturbing because it establishes a disturbing pattern.
All right, Charlie Angus, can I, while I've got you here, can I ask you, you raised concerns today about the decision by your leader to remove Mr. Christofferson from a committee vice chairmanship because he voted to support a Conservative motion critical of the government's summer jobs grants program. Why was this a bad move by your leader, do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions that I'm concerned about, and I certainly, in my 14 years in politics, I always accept the right of the leader to make decisions, and sometimes I don't always agree with them, but that's what a leader does. The question I have about removing Mr. Christofferson from House and Procedural Affairs committees, it's not like other committees. This is a committee that's actually supposed to represent all parliamentarians. It's set up in a very specific manner so that parliamentarians of any party who find themselves with questions or in trouble can go to PROC and have those questions answered. So I thought it was not the best judgment to remove him from that committee as a punishment over a motion that was not party policy. I just don't think it was well thought through.
All right, and I gather that'll come up at your caucus meeting tomorrow.
And let me just say,
no, come on.
Oh, no,
is it his show? Every time he's got to keep talking.
Are you going to weigh in on
Joe, all I was going to say was,
on everything.
I would never call for Charlie to be punished for supporting any Liberal policy. That's all I was going to say.
All right, well, let him have that, Mr. Angus. All right.
Well, you can say that, yeah.
Okay.
As if it'll happen.
Thank you all, gentlemen. Thank you all. Take care.